You're listening to the Fezcast, produced on behalf of the Saracen Supporters Association and featuring the independent thoughts, rants and rambles of Saracens fans and special guests. If you'd like your opinion to be heard on the show, you can find the Fezcast on Facebook or Fezcast_SSA on Instagram and whatever Twitter is known as these days. But for now, enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, hello everybody, and should we say, well, we're what we're calling this episode, Matt. We're recording this in the immediate aftermath of the big win away in Newcastle. So away 5-0. Welcome, Dano. There's been a murder. That was a bit of a shilling today, wasn't it, Matt?
It was. I'm not really sure what the Welsh accent was for there, but anyway.
Oh, I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute, Matt. But it's just you and I in the immediate aftermath of the game. Just wanted, though, a quick review of last week's show and to say thanks again to Nick Mullins for what was a really brilliant interview and gave us some really good numbers as well, didn't it, Matt? On it. So obviously it attracted some listeners.
It did, yeah. We appreciate Nick doing a bit of publicity for us on that as well. We've obviously got some one-time listeners out of that show. Hello, everyone.
yeah. Hopefully, you won't be too disappointed if you are giving us a second go. That it is just going to be me and Matt drinking winners' beer with cheesy winners' grins on our faces. After, well, it was, as I said at the start, a bit of a shellacking. Let's just be honest about it. Newcastle are poor, aren't they? They really are poor. And I mean, there's got to be a worry for the league, I think, Matt, in so much as that you look at some clubs out there. Bristol getting humbled at home by Sale. Leicester have had an awful start to the season, but I think that's a fairly odd position for them. And Gloucester and Newcastle, there is some real issues with quality in this league, isn't there?
There is. We kind of expected it a little bit with salaries being squeezed and the financial issues that we've got. You know, there's only so much you can do. Players, big name players, would rather play in leagues where they're going to earn more money, and that is absolutely fair enough. And the thing I always think, it doesn't matter if the standard of the league in general does go down in a way, because as long as it's sort of across the board and it's on a fairly even keel from there. What you don't want is teams being head and shoulders above the rest or being cut adrift. I think it's still quite an open league. Everyone's beating everyone except for Newcastle at the moment. And like you say, yeah, Leicester are probably in a bit of a false position. Gloucester, don't really know. I can see them being bottom 2 or 3. But yeah, it's Newcastle that really are looking like they're cut away from the rest of the league. But it's difficult just to turn around and say Newcastle were a poor team, because actually I think we'll talk about it. There were some players that showed today that they have got some serious talent. But the trouble is convincing players to play in Newcastle when they haven't got a huge amount of salary clout, and as an attractive option for players from around the world, Newcastle isn't necessarily the place you immediately think to go. So it is difficult for them, but there's only so much you can do, isn't there?
Well, that's the big issue for Newcastle as well, is that their one real superstar has had a great World Cup, Mateo Carreras, and he'll be off to France next year. Barry did mention on WhatsApp, and I mean, we'll talk about players at Newcastle Falcons. Is there any way of smuggling Adam Radwan onto the bus? Because I think he is probably one player from Newcastle Falcons who really deserves to be playing a better standard of rugby somewhere better. And I mean, Sean Maitland's had a great game again today for Saracens, but you wonder whether this is we say this about him every time. He's had more comebacks than Frank Sinatra, hasn't he, really? But, I mean, you're expecting Sean to be perhaps finishing at the end of this season. Adam Radwan would be a prime example of someone that you would perhaps look to bring in to replace him.
Yeah, I think Sean Maitland is our version of Columbo, isn't he? Just one more year. I'm dating myself there, aren't I? But no, Radwan is a player that I'd be looking at. I mentioned as well. I think if Adam Radwan can command a pretty decent salary, I would imagine, as a slightly cheaper option potentially, Stevens on the other wing, I think, is equally sharp. Whether he'd fit into a Saracens mould, I don't really know, but. Yeah, Newcastle have got some talent, and that clique of Argentinian players as well is working wonders for them. And De Chaves in the second row, I think, also a very good player, but not someone that we would necessarily need at Saracens. So, yeah, it's easy to say that Newcastle are the worst team in the league, unless you're Sam, who obviously thinks it's Exeter still. But we've got to give them credit for showing a decent amount of fight today, for sure.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure that you're right. I mean, no player goes onto that pitch. And I will mention, as we're going through our, we've had Howay 5-0 with Colombo. We'll mention that Adam Radwan's got a moustache that Trevor Eve would have rocked quite nicely in shoestrings. So there but now we can really go back. But yeah, I mean, one last Argentinian player to mention at Falcons, and I will say, Eduardo Bello. We very rarely criticise people that we sign at Saracens, but what on earth did we see in him? Because he was awful today as well. I think he just didn't show up, and I mean, it's intriguing, isn't it, when you get a player who's obviously got a good rep and has gone away to the World Cup and performs. Why is he not doing it in the league? In his domestic rugby, and he certainly didn't do it for Saracens. He's not cutting up any trees at Newcastle, is he?
No. I mean, he's consistently in the Argentina side, and yeah, it just seems that for whatever reason, playing in England just isn't for him at the moment. I mean, his early days for Newcastle, he might come good for him, and he's certainly starting games for them. But yeah, like you say, it's not often that Saracens make a signing where you go, hold on a second, even when it is a squad player you expect to be third or fourth choice, when they come on and when they play, you go, yeah, do you know what? He's fitting into the mould and he's playing our way. But yeah, it just never really got going for him. And I've got to keep an eye on him for Newcastle, really. He's obviously gone up there because he's got mates there, which probably helps. But yeah, I don't know. Very, very strange.
Indeed. Yeah, very strange indeed. Well, look, let's stay with the Argentinians because there's two Argentinians who made their Saracens debuts today. Juan Gonzalez started the game, got a try, and young Cindy came on the wing, and both of them looked exceptionally good, fitted straight in to the manner born, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, Gonzalez did exactly what I like a player of his position and style to do. He just got on with simple stuff very well. Don't think he missed a tackle at all. Some good work at the line out. And he topped off one of those sort of solid 7 out of 10 performances with a little gimme try at the end as well. And Cinti, when we signed him, I think a lot of London Irish fans were looking at that going, they've Saracens have been clever and they've picked one of the better players out of the rubble there. I think with some of the bigger names in the London Irish squad going off to other clubs, you could have looked at it and gone, are we missing a trick? But actually, I think we've been very, very astute with that signing. And looked very, very sharp in the short space of time he was on the pitch. So pretty excited by both of them.
Let's stay in the backs though, because someone else who I thought had a really, really good. In fact, there was an awful lot of good performances across the pitch, but the backs, in recent weeks we've been slightly critical of, have we gone back a little bit back to basics, a little bit up the jumper, kicking. Actually, tonight we saw quite a lot of expansive play and some adventure, typified, I think, by Elliot Daly's try, which was just, we seem to have this momentum going at the moment. The way that we're playing is it's coming off the pack, off of a line out, everything's quick. We're getting go forward, and then the run arounds that are coming and the angles that people are taking just to arc runs, and Elliot's run just superb. You sat there thinking, is Elliot Daly really that quick? And he's a deceptively quick player. But the way he's just gone round outside of his man and then in, exceptionally good stuff from him.
Yeah, and credit Sean Maitland there as well, just for angling his run just to fix Obata onto him as well and create a bit of space for Daly. But yeah, I mean, so in the first half, I think the 4 tries we scored were all from lineouts. 2 scored in the conventional way by the hooker off of the back of the maul. But it's nice to see that when the maul isn't necessarily going forwards, and credit to Newcastle, they actually defended, other than the 2 tries, they defended the mauls really, really well. But we weren't afraid just to go, okay, well, that's not worked, and stick it straight into a backs move, and it's worked both times. I think quite often you do see teams where they can't get going with the maul going forwards, and they just pick it off the back and just run it straight back into it again for some reason. But yeah,
it is weird to see that, isn't it? And I think a lot of that, though, came from the return of Ivan Van Zyl to the number 9 shirt. And I mean, this year we've been critical of both Simpson and Davies at points, and then been complimentary of them when they deserved compliments. And then, Gareth came on in the second half and just carried on what Ivan was doing. But Ivan's such a good deliverer of the ball, so speedy. And, what I like to see from a scrum half is he knows what's on before he gets to the ball. And what's on is normally the right thing. And his decision-making and what he's going to do is so, so good. It was just, that gave us that impetus to be able to say, right, okay, well, we're going to kick it here, or we're going to keep it here, or we're going to go wide with it. And it was just done the right thing at the right time, brilliantly well.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think for Gareth Simpson, I think, again, it's early days for him, but I'm sort of looking at him as thriving on a sort of broken last 25 minutes of a game. That's his style at 9. Yet to see him really sort of control a game from the start, although he hasn't had a huge amount of opportunities to do that yet. But yeah, Ivan Van Zyl, for us, he sort of has that ability to, rather than just go with the tempo, which for him is normally pretty damn quick, actually dictate it as well. Whereas Alec Davis, I think, has blown hot and cold. When the game has necessitated playing it slowly, he's played it slowly and not necessarily executed quite so well. But Van Zyl, very, very underrated scrum half, yeah. And pleased we got him, pleased he's back in the team. And there's competition for that place, there's competition for pretty much all of them, isn't there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think personally I think Ivan Van Zyl's potentially the best scrum half in the Premiership at the moment. I really rate him that highly. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with him internationally, because I think South Africa are going to do a rebuild or a certain reset after their World Cup. Does he, if he has another good season playing for Saracens, get into Rassie Erasmus's, viewpoint? Or he's been here now, this is his 3rd season at Saracens, I think. So is there a question that somebody in the England setup could potentially ask the question about residency or whatever? There's potentials there. He's certainly a scrum half, I feel, who deserves international recognition, and certainly more than what he's had already. So, for me, that's where someone should be looking at him at.
Yeah, it's tricky to know. I mean, the person to ask really is Ivan. Does he want to play his way into South Africa, reckon, or is he actually feeling after a couple of years that he's he'll take some more international honours from wherever he can get them? Who knows? I mean, South Africa are blessed with a lot of good scrum halves. I mean, they managed to play 4 of them at the same time at the World Cup at points, but there's certainly plenty of choice for him. But quite happy having him available for Saracens every single week, as he is at the moment, barring the odd injury here and there. So, yeah, up to him, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting to watch where it goes. But as I say, I mean, if it doesn't come his way, it's only to the benefit of Saracens that you've got a lad who's going to be playing week in, week out, injuries allowing. Just quick one. Mention Manu coming on, Vunipola. Did his normal sort of like headless kind of, are we sure what he's going to do? And then suddenly a moment of brilliance, which he seems to be able to pull out more and more regularly now. And, I think he's actually developing, isn't he, Matt?
I think he is, yeah. Ultimately, we're going to be talking about replacements for Owen Farrell for a long, long, long time. And we're probably doing this every week now. But yeah, Manu, I don't see as your number one choice at 10 going forward. I think he's the sort of player that might just be around the Saracen squad forever, regardless of where he is in the squad. But yeah, I don't know whether it was just because of where the game was. It was a little bit broken by the end of it. But Manu, a few times, received the ball and almost tried to run in 3 different directions, pass it in 4 different directions, and didn't quite know what was going on and who to give it to. But then, yeah, right at the end of the game there, he sort of looked slightly like a rabbit in the headlights with players running towards him, not knowing where to give the ball. Dummied himself, both of them, ducked, and all of a sudden he's got a clear run to the line in front of him. So, yeah, this elaborate double bluff of don't know what to do with the ball, may as well just score a try. So I don't really know about that one. But, yeah, he could be... he could be developing quite well, yeah. And I think actually what we do need to do, if we're serious about Manu as a long-term player in this squad, is actually give him a little bit of responsibility. I don't know that he's necessarily held back by having the likes of Alex Good and Alex Lazowski around him, but certainly when he plays, we don't send everything through 10. Don't really know why. He's played enough for Saracens now to know how to play the Saracens' way. So it's probably time we trusted him and let him sink or swim.
Well, there is an element of that. I also understand the fact that what's great is if you've got Alex Good and Owen Farrell and Elliot Daly and Alex Lazowski on the pitch, and you start with a Manu Vunipola, for argument's sake, with 2 of those players I've mentioned, that it gives you so many more options. And it's kind of what England try doing with Marcus Smith and Owen Farrell, or George Ford and Owen Farrell, or whatever. It's a case of where I think Manu's going to be very, very strong is being a first receiver on second phase or third phase ball. So, if you've got Owen Farrell playing an inside centre role and he's the guy who actually comes in as first receiver, and then you suddenly see Manu, or in England's case, Marcus Smith coming through, and there's a bit more of a broken, that's when you use them. And that's what I think they've been trying to do. And perhaps even Eddie Jones was trying to do that just badly when he had, George Ford or Marcus Smith and Owen Farrell, whatever. And perhaps that's something that they see, that you look at him as being on the field, but there being a bit more fluidity, almost total rugby. It's like that whole Dutch total football idea of it doesn't matter what number shirt you've got, if you do it. And gives you a prime example, your second row replacement of the day, Big Billy Vunipola coming on and doing much the same as that. It was... You wouldn't have thought he was having a number 5 on his shirt, as it were, although it was a substitute shirt. He was doing things like what Billy does, where he'll bosh, and then little cute pass out the back sort of thing.
Yeah, and it obviously helps when you've got Gonzalez and Christie on the pitch, who are both adept in the line-out, so you don't necessarily need one of your second rows to be a line-out option, as Billy isn't, really. So yeah, plenty of strength. And we've managed to go all this far into the show. I'm just going to wedge it in now. We've managed to get this far without mentioning either Theo Dan or Tom Willis, which is
I was going to leave the icing and the little cherry on the cake to the very end, because I think we do need to talk about those 2 guys. But as I say, you've mentioned Andy Christie. Andy Christie got man of the match, signed a new contract, which is great news. He's definitely of the future. Ended the game at 8, which amazing when you think that Billy Vunipola's on the pitch. But Billy I mentioned it on the on our WhatsApp group, where I said I remember when Tim Robber went to second row for England, and everybody went, "What the hell's going on here?" And suddenly you see Billy Vunipola look at that, and maybe that's a path for Billy to take. I mean, that's a hell of a small block, as it were, in the engine room there. I mean, that's a V8 with some power, isn't it? sat there in your engine room. And as you say, if you've got Andy Christie, whose line-out work today, both in defence and attack, was absolutely top draw, and Gonzalez, Theo McFarlane when he comes back, whoever it may be, Tom Willis operates the line-out as well. I mean, it's a way forward. It's taking the game... Again, that total rugby look of it doesn't matter what shirt number you're wearing, we can change our jobs around.
Yeah, definitely. And I've said this on the show before, actually, with Andy Christie. When you look back a couple of years and he was just starting to break into the Saracens team, you had him and Sean Raffel, who were sort of coming up at about the same time. And Sean was ahead of Andy in the pecking order and was making a few headlines. He broke a big tackle record playing in the cup and things. But then all of a sudden, Sean's disappeared off to Ulster, and we kept Andy Christie. And at the time, you probably look at that and go, maybe we've done that not necessarily the wrong way round, but the less expected way round. If you could only keep one of them. Part of the reason I thought for that was the fact that Sean is an out and out 7. And Andy Christie can play across the entire back row and in the second row. And at a time when squads are being squeezed a bit, you need those utility players to fill your squad. But actually, I don't know what Sean's doing at Ulster necessarily. I'm not a big watcher of Ulster, so he could be absolutely flying for them. I don't think he is. But Andy Christie has clearly come on leaps and bounds in the last couple of years, and it does show that what a brilliant decision that was. And yeah, so far this season, Andy Christie, among 2 or 3 other players, is right up there as the most consistent player of the season, barring someone that we are now going to mention at the end, even though I've mentioned him once already.
Well, indeed, yeah. I mean, we got to talk about the spine of the pack, and let's start with Theo Dan, and we'll move on to my speciality to finish off with. But Theo Dan is an absolute ball of energy. His line-out darts have improved out of all recognition, and I think that a lot of that may well be down to having 8 weeks with Steve Borthwick for England. We'll see that improvement because Steve Borthwick is one of the best line-out operators of the last 20-odd years, and certainly one of the best line-out coaches there is around. So his line-out darts have improved. His ability around the field has not been in any sort of, there's nothing about that. We know how good he is around the field. What he's got to work on next, though, is the scrum. And I think that's what he has to focus on now. There was a couple of times where he gave away scrum penalties through just not being cute enough, I don't think, at scrum time. And, if you actually look at the starting hookers, you got Theo up against Jamie Blamire, who, was expected to be the backup to Jamie George. 6 months ago, you'd have expected him to be the backup to Jamie George. And for whatever reason, he's fallen off slightly. The only place that Jamie Blamire got anything over Theo Dan was at scrum time.
Yeah. And to be fair, it's regardless of what front row we've had out this season, so far, really, the scrum has been the one element of every game, including the ones that we've won, that has been a little bit shaky. It wasn't too bad today, but it was certainly, like you say, gave away a couple of penalties from Theo Dan almost being a little bit over eager by the look of it, and Jamie Blamire being pretty clever and just waiting for Theo to overextend himself and fall over. But yeah, Theo, he's still a young lad. He's had some big injury issues, which means he probably hasn't come into the side actually as quickly as he may well have done. But as Claire Thomas pointed out on comms, I didn't actually realise this, but that was only Theo's 8th Premiership start. He's already been off to a World Cup. And so he's jumped in pretty quick, and I don't know, is he Saracens' first choice hooker ahead of Jamie George? Maybe not quite, but we're certainly seeing really big competition between the two of them for that first choice hooker spot. And that's not even mentioning the players we've got behind him.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think, if we go back now, just take a couple of stages back and a few years back, I mean, there was a point when we would have had exactly the same conversation over Shark Brits and Jamie George.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I think Theo is at exactly the same spot as where Jamie was when we won our first European trophy in Lyon, yeah? And it was a case of you're starting Shark Brits because he has the experience, because he has the knowledge, because he is a big game player. But you're looking at Jamie George on the bench and saying, if something happens to Schalke, we ain't worried. Now, next week we play Quins, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that in a minute. But we play Quins, and you start Jamie George against Quins because it's a big game. And Jamie George is your big game player. No two ways about that. But like the final last year, if Jamie George gets a knock in the first 10 minutes and Theo Dan comes on, I ain't worried. Which might, in other positions, you might be slightly more worried. If Owen gets a knock in the first 10 minutes and you're actually against a really good Quins team, and Quins are fine at the moment, and you actually have to push Alex Good in at 10 or Manu Vanapola, then you get a little bit worried. Have we got that depth there? Hooker, not a worry whatsoever. And indeed, the lad that came on from Jersey Reds did well. You're looking at Wolfie and KP and you're thinking, where are these guys going to slot in? That's the big question.
Yep. And again, squad's getting smaller probably. When they're all fit, there are now 6 hookers to choose from, including Samson Adejimi in that as well. And like I say, I've seen enough of James Hadfield coming off Jersey to say he's definitely worth his place in there.
Yeah.
And you think, well, you certainly got to drop 1 next season, potentially 2. Yeah, there's a couple of players that you wouldn't have expected to have been okay offloading last year even. That we may well be looking at that. But yeah, you mentioned Schalke Brits. I think Theo Dan is probably the closest. There's never going to be another Schalke Brits, but Theo Dan is possibly the closest thing to it with his open play. And like you say, his line-outs have improved. It has always been a bit of a thing with Saracens hookers, other than Jamie George not actually being able to throw a ball. And Theo is sorting that out, definitely. So yeah, we've got a cracker there, haven't we?
Absolutely. And talking of crackers, I mean, I think perhaps one of the best signings that we've made is Tom Willis, who is setting the world on fire, I think. And it's interesting, isn't it, that people have, the one criticism that's come out of England, we discussed this previously, is taking Billy Vanapola as your only number 8, only to see Ben Earl play for England at 8 for the majority of the tournament. Zach Mercer's name keeps being bandied about. He's now injured long term. Alex Dombrandt's had a cracking start of the season for Quins. There's no problems in saying that, and he's got England caps, so England experience. But Tom Willis, he's sticking his mitts in the air for that, England recognition come the Six Nations if he carries on the way that he is doing at number 8, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And then it becomes an issue for Saracens where you've got Tom disappearing off for England, you've got Ben Earl disappearing off for England. Billy may well be done, and Billy might be that player you sort of playing while the internationals are on, although thankfully the Six Nations is now being played in a period of tumbleweed for the Premiership, which is good. But yeah, Tom Willis probably, one of our best signings, certainly the best signing so far this season, but I'm trying to think of another one in recent seasons that have hit the ground running this quickly. Not a lot springing to mind, to be honest.
No, I off the top of my head, I can't think of any who've quite, and I think that does come from the fact that he was already established at a top Premiership side, albeit one that got into trouble, in Wasps. So having that experience is a lot easier than being, Theo McFarlane coming from Samoa, basketball, whatever he did as a late whatever, or other players that perhaps have come in from foreign clubs to join us because it's a different environment, it's a different culture, whatever. So I think that probably helps in Tom's case. But yeah, he's just been absolutely outstanding. And, you know, I might have mentioned it before on the Fezcast. It's my specialist position. I really do rate him highly, and I see an awful lot there that I like of him as a number 8 that I really would love to have seen in my own game and never would have seen in my own game. But there you go. Matt, we're going to tidy this up now. Just mention, you know, last week we spoke and you did a bit of a mystic, Matt, and got the pretty much nailed on the starting 15 for this game. Presumably next week we're away at Harlequins. I mean, we have talked about, you know, you're looking after your superstar players, suggesting they have a bit of time off here or there or anything, and that they'll probably play more home matches than they would away matches. But given the start that Quins have had, given the momentum that we're now seeing, you bring back your Owen Farrells and your Maro Itojis for the Stoop, don't you?
Yep, I think if they're all fit, you play them all. As I said last week, I don't know, and no one really knows what the rules and regs and decisions are around rest for players, whether certain players are due another week off, pretty sharpish. But yeah, I think for Quins away, it's also a derby weekend. It's all having a big amount of publicity, so I think in general the league wants the big name players playing. So yeah, I think everyone's out there if they're fit. I do wonder with Hugh Tizard coming off early in this game whether there is potentially any doubt about Maro or Nick in the second row as well. But yeah, other than that, I think whoever's fit from the big names coming back, they're all playing.
Absolutely. And of course, next weekend as well, not only is the big game against Quins, also we've got the start of the women's competition. We're at home to Loughborough Lightning. Myself and Shaz have got tickets. You're going, Joe's going, so we'll try and perhaps sort. I know you've got press passes, haven't you? You've been sweet talking Harry, so you'll be in the nice warm seats with the nice coffees and everything, I expect.
No. We're in the stands like normal people. Don't worry about that. But no, we hopefully will get an opportunity to speak to one of the players after the match in a slightly more official setting rather than accosting them at the side of the pitch while they're all trying to talk to their families. So yeah, fingers crossed for that.
No, that's great stuff. So well, that's all to look forward to next Wednesday on the Fezcast, and we'll say away and all the best to the lads. I hope they have a good trip back down the A1M1 and get home nice and safe tonight and everything. And we'll say thank you everybody for listening in on this shortened version, because obviously we've had a few bumper versions, so Matt's accounting has been a bit difficult, hasn't it, mate? But yeah, a nice short version of the show this week, and we'll be back next week with the reaction to Quins and Loughborough Lightning.
Hello.
Cheers, Ed.
This is the Fezcast.